When the RCMP released its documents on the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the public expected answers. What they got instead were pages that looked like secrets, blocks of thick black ink swallowing every other line. Beneath those redactions lies the real story of this case, what investigators know, what they suspect, and what they can't yet prove. The files are called information to obtain, affidavits police submit to request search warrants. They are supposed to describe, in detail, why each warrant is needed. In this case, they mention phone records, banking logs, surveillance footage, even digital traces from a deleted app. But most of the paragraphs are gone, censored under black rectangles that stretch for pages. When journalists first saw those pages, they thought the redactions were routine. But as months passed, portions were quietly unsealed after court challenges. What emerged from beneath the ink changed everything. Witness accounts of a vehicle moving at night, details about a mysterious USB recording, and the discovery that both parents had passed their polygraphs. Each new layer of unredacted text revealed not closure, but deeper confusion. Instead of clarifying the timeline, the documents exposed its fractures. Statements that once seemed simple now clashed with data, phone logs that didn't match memory, timestamps that contradicted silence. The black lines weren't hiding answers, they were hiding uncertainty. To the RCMP, those lines serve one purpose: protection. They guard witness identities, preserve the integrity of ongoing leads, and prevent false conclusions from spreading. But to the public, they've become symbols of mistrust, proof that someone, somewhere, knows more than they're saying. Every blackout feels like a missing piece of the truth. And yet, buried in those redactions may be the final bridge between fact and disappearance. The unsealed fragments already show how close investigators are circling to something: a timeline, a message, a night when sound and signal collided. This episode looks between the lines, at what the RCMP won't show, and what those black bars might actually mean for the search for Lilly and Jack Sullivan. The first time reporters opened the newly released RCMP documents, they looked less like files and more like funeral clothes. Whole pages blotted out, sentences amputated mid-word. To the untrained eye, it seemed like censorship. To investigators, it was survival, a way to protect an investigation still breathing. These were the information to obtain affidavits, or ITOs, the backbone of any Canadian search warrant. They are sworn statements by detectives explaining why they need access to private data: a phone, a computer, a house. In theory, they are windows into the truth. In practice, they are mirrors that show only what the RCMP allows the world to see. The Sullivan documents were first released in August, months after Lilly and Jack vanished. At that point, entire sections were hidden: names, addresses, whole paragraphs marked withheld for investigative integrity. Then, following legal challenges from media outlets, the courts ordered a second release in October, this time, with fewer black bars. The difference between the two versions told its own story. Where the first edition had been pure shadow, the second contained faint light. Readers could now see fragments: a witness named Brad Wong describing an engine coming and going. Another, Justin Smith, hearing headlights sweep the tree line. An investigator noting that both parents passed their polygraphs. References to a deleted messaging app, Text Plus. Each recovered sentence felt like a heartbeat returning to the file. But even these fragments were surrounded by darkness. Entire pages of digital forensics analysis remained covered, every line that might reveal how, when, or where a phone connected. Redactions also concealed the details of the USB recording given by Patty Pearson, the children's great-grandmother. Readers could see the outline of the evidence but never the content. It was like reading a map where every road ends in black ink. To understand what those lines mean, you have to understand how the RCMP writes. Each paragraph of an ITO is weighed against two questions: could releasing this harm the case, and could it harm a person? Anything that answers yes is buried. The goal isn't to hide guilt, it's to preserve options. Once something is public, it can't be unseen, and future suspects can tailor their stories around it. Yet in cases like this, the blackouts do more than protect, they provoke. The public sees a missing person file wrapped in secrecy and assumes conspiracy. If there's nothing to hide, one online commenter wrote, "Why all the ink?" But the truth is colder. Because there is nothing yet proven, every theory must remain protected from itself. Inside the unsealed portions, investigators reveal just enough to show direction. They confirmed that warrants were granted for phone and banking records, for surveillance around Lansdowne Station, and for communications data from Text Plus Inc. They acknowledged that both Malehya Brooks-Murray and Daniel Martel were interviewed, polygraphed, and found truthful. Then the text stops, swallowed by rectangles of silence. Those rectangles mark the parts that still matter, the sections where RCMP analysts discussed what they found inside the devices, or how they interpreted the digital traces that survived. The public doesn't see that because those traces may lead to live leads, or because they may lead nowhere at all. In law enforcement, uncertainty is privileged information. When journalists compared the first and second releases side by side, they noticed something subtle. The order of the redactions told a timeline. Early pages dealt with physical searches, the house, the surrounding forest, the vehicles. Later pages, almost entirely blacked out, focused on digital evidence. That pattern suggested where investigators now believe the truth might live, not in the woods, but in the data. One RCMP source, speaking on background to the Canadian press, admitted that the decision to redact heavily was not just about privacy but about context. If you show one piece without the other, the source said, people will assume connections that don't exist. In other words, the black lines aren't always hiding facts. Sometimes they're hiding the absence of them. Still, the gaps have power. Each one becomes a canvas for imagination. In online communities, users have begun reading the redactions like fortune tellers, counting the length of each blackout, guessing what words fit beneath. A long line might mean a name, a short one, a verb like found or sent. It's an entirely new genre of speculation, crowdsourced paranoia written between the blanks. For the RCMP officers who wrote those affidavits, the ink is personal. Every hidden line represents a lead that once felt promising. Some will never resurface, others may return years later when technology catches up. Redactions are a form of time capsule, sealing what today could mislead, to preserve it for when the world is ready to understand. The clearest proof of that philosophy lies in the paragraph that survived untouched. It reads, because Jack and Lilly are still missing, polygraph examinations were conducted with the intention of ruling out that possibility of criminal involvement. The investigation remains open. Between those two sentences stretches a gulf of unprinted space, the mystery itself. As readers, we experience that mystery as frustration, but to detectives, it's precision. Every piece of text withheld buys them time to verify, to test, to avoid contaminating whatever fragile truth may still exist. The black lines aren't endings, they're pauses. And in a file where every other trace has vanished, footprints, scent, surveillance, sometimes a pause is all that's left to follow. So the next time you look at those documents, don't ask what's hidden, ask why it's too important to reveal. Because in the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the truth may not live in the words we can read, but in the spaces we can't. When the court ordered a second release of the Sullivan investigation documents in October, reporters didn't just read them, they dissected them. Every visible word, every surviving comma became evidence. Between the black bars, a faint outline of the RCMP's hidden reasoning began to appear. The first section, unsealed, covered witness statements. Until then, readers know only that two neighbors had heard something. Now names emerged, Brad Wang and Justin Smith, and with them, a timeline. Wang said a loud vehicle came and went from the direction of the Sullivan home several times after midnight. Smith, who lived closer to the main road, described seeing headlights near the railroad tracks. Those pages were crucial, not because of what they proved, but because of how they were framed. Each statement ended with a line still redacted, a blacked-out evaluation by investigators. Two seasoned reporters, that was telling. It meant police hadn't dismissed the witnesses, but hadn't confirmed them either. The ink itself became punctuation for uncertainty. The next partial release revealed something even more delicate, a short paragraph describing the polygraph results of Malehya Brooks-Murray and Daniel Martel. For months, the public had speculated about whether either had failed the test. The unredacted sentence settled that. Martel's polygraph indicated he was truthful, as did the test for Brooks-Murray. Then, abruptly, the black returned, sealing whatever analysis followed. What did investigators conclude from two truthful charts? No one outside the RCMP knows. Farther down, another patch of text resurfaced, a fragment describing digital evidence from a messaging application called Text Plus. Just enough survived to reveal that police had obtained company records covering May 1st and 2nd, 2025. Everything after that line, connection logs, timestamps, possible messages, vanished beneath ink. The silence was deafening. For journalists, these fragments acted like constellations. They didn't show the whole picture, but their alignment hinted at where investigators were looking. Witnesses heard movement. Digital data showed activity. Polygraphs ruled out deception. The redactions covered the space where those three elements intersect, the center of the mystery itself. The USB section was next. The first version of the files had described it only as a digital recording provided by a relative. The October release named names: Patty Pearson, the great-grandmother, and Darren Geddes, the man on the call. The conversation, police wrote, contained theory-based information about the children's disappearance. Then the black returned for several pages. It likely hid the RCMP's analysis, whether Geddes had revealed anything verifiable, whether his speculation overlapped with evidence. Court filings show why those pages remained sealed. The RCMP argued that releasing them could interfere with investigative avenues not yet concluded. In other words, the conversation still mattered. To the public, that phrase sounded ominous. To detectives, it was simply procedure, proof that the case wasn't cold, only quiet. One of the most intriguing partial reveals involved the search warrants for telecommunications data. Redactions once obscured entire paragraphs listing the sources requested. Now, faint lines confirmed that investigators had targeted cellular network connections, Wi-Fi routers, and associated Bluetooth devices belonging to the family. The new text didn't expose results, but it showed scale. An investigation reaching far beyond the rural property. The last pages, still almost entirely black, carried date
over the last
stamps
6
from
months,
August and
I wouldn't
September
miss this for a world.
2025.
Brooks Murray did not attend the vigil.
Reporters
Her
noted
family
that their
says she
very
quietly
existence
marked
proved
Jack's
the file was
birthday
still
with her
active.
mother, and gifts
Each
from the
blackout,
vigil would be delivered to
was
her.
evidence of motion.
The children's paternal
If the
grandmother,
RCMP
Belinda
were
Gray,
finished, there
says
would be
she
nothing left to
appreciates
hide.
the
To
outpouring
reconstruct
of support.
what those black
People
lines
have
conceal,
beautiful
journalists
hearts,
built timelines
and I
using
know
every
if we
source they
give
could
them a
find:
chance,
press releases,
everybody can help.
interviews, community statements.
Everybody can help,
When
and
they
everybody
overlaid
wants
those
to
public
help.
events with the positions of
So I
redactions,
think this
patterns
is
emerged.
beautiful.
The longest
Angela
blackouts
McIver,
clustered
CBC
around
News,
to topics:
Stellarton.
digital communications and forensic analysis of the USB. Those were the areas most likely to generate new leads. Experts in Canadian law explained that such redactions often protect not suspects but techniques, revealing how data was retrieved, which servers, what tools, can compromise future cases. The ink, then, isn't covering a person, it's covering a method. Still, the psychological effect on the public was undeniable. Each new release reignited debate. Social media threads compared one version of the documents to another, speculating about every change in word count. Some users even measured the pixel width of redaction bars, guessing which phrases fit beneath. In the absence of clarity, imagination became its own investigation. Inside the RCMP, officers watched the frenzy with quiet frustration. They couldn't defend themselves without breaking the very secrecy they were sworn to maintain. One senior investigator, quoted anonymously, summed it up: "People think the black lines mean we're hiding guilt. Most of the time, they mean we're protecting the innocent, including the children, if they're still alive." That sentence reframed everything. Redactions weren't tombstones, they were shields. They hid names of witnesses who might still matter, digital leads not yet verified, theories still fragile enough to break under public weight. The investigation needed silence the way a wound needs bandages, not to conceal, but to heal. And yet, for readers, silence is unbearable. The Sullivan case has lived half in the light and half under ink. Each new page gives just enough to believe an answer exists, but never enough to reach it. The black lines are both barrier and breadcrumb, drawing us forward while keeping us out. When the next version of the files is eventually released, the pattern will likely repeat: more text, fewer bars, another glimpse into the void. Until then, the redactions remain the most eloquent part of the record. They say nothing, and in that nothing, they say everything. Months after the last release, the Sullivan documents still sit on desks across Canada like unsolved riddles. Every journalist who reads them ends up with the same impression, that the investigation speaks through absence. The black lines are not mistakes. They are language. Each one says, not yet. Inside the RCMP, that phrase has become a mantra. Not yet means the case isn't closed, the questions aren't settled, and the truth, whatever it is, hasn't run out of road. Investigators still review tips, still re-examine data, still look for matches between phone logs and witness reports. The redactions are the walls that keep those possibilities safe from collapse. But outside those walls, the world doesn't wait. The community of Lansdowne Station has learned to live beside the mystery. Some residents refuse to discuss it. Others whisper about the night of May 2nd as if repeating a ghost story. Every sound of a passing vehicle echoes the one the neighbors once swore they heard. Every quiet morning feels like the one that began with an empty house. For Malehya Brooks Murray, the ink is more than metaphor, it is the color of her life turned. Since the partial release, she has stopped responding to journalists entirely. Friends say she follows the coverage but never comments. Every sentence they uncover becomes another thing I have to defend, she told one relative. Every black line, that's the only part that protects me. Daniel Martel reacts differently. He still speaks, though his words are tired. He has told reporters the same thing for months. My vehicle never moved. The RCMP knows that. When shown the redacted files, he said they made him feel two things at once: relief that investigators are still working, and fear that the world assumes those black bars hide his name. Inside police briefings, officers discussed that exact problem. Transparency is supposed to build trust. Secrecy protects truth. Between those aims lies the public's confusion. One commander put it bluntly: we can't win. If we reveal everything, we lose the investigation. If we reveal nothing, we lose belief. The Sullivan case sits exactly in that tension. The documents themselves show the struggle. Paragraphs about the USB recording still sealed. Details of the text plus data still gone. The RCMP knows that every time they black out a sentence, they create a vacuum that rumor will fill. And yet, each new rumor risks damaging whatever real lead might survive. It's a balance measured in millimeters of ink. Reporters who followed the story the longest describe it as a case that punishes curiosity. They say that every time a new line is unredacted, it opens 10 new theories. It's the paradox of modern transparency. Seeing more can mean understanding less. For investigators, the weight of those theories is personal. They receive anonymous messages, wild claims, and online accusations. Each must be logged, verified, dismissed, or pursued. The work never ends. One detective said, "The public thinks the black lines mean we stopped talking, but inside, we never stop." Within the RCMP Digital Forensics Unit, analysts still revisit the same files, re-indexing phone metadata, rerunning pattern recognition on deleted logs, updating database matches. Most of it leads nowhere, yet every once in a while, a small inconsistency surfaces, a timestamp corrected, a line of code decoded, and hope stirs again. That's why the black lines remain. They protect future relevance. For the families, the secrecy hurts in quieter ways. They can't read what the police already know. They see their own names hidden under ink, not knowing whether the words beside them are credible, eliminated, or still under review. They are both subjects and spectators of their own story. Publicly, the RCMP still insists the redactions are temporary. Spokesperson Alison Jarrett wrote, "The remaining blackouts reflect ongoing concerns related to privacy and continued protection of the investigative process." Privately, officers admit that ongoing might mean years. Some cases remain partly sealed forever, long after the truth is found. In Bible Hill headquarters, the Sullivan file is stored in a cabinet labeled Open Active, Nova East MCU. Its pages alternate between type and blackout, like heartbeat and flatline. To the officers who handled it, those pages symbolize their entire profession, working inside the narrow space between what can be proven and what must be protected. Each year, the legal team reviews whether more can be revealed. Sometimes, just one sentence is freed. Last fall, it was a single line confirming that both parents' polygraphs were truthful. The next unsealing might bring another fragment, a new witness detail, a digital clue, perhaps only a date. Each sliver is treated as progress. For the public, however, progress that comes in black and white feels indistinguishable from stillness. 6 months, then a year, and the same phrase persists: investigation ongoing. To outsiders, That sounds like failure. To the RCMP, it's the definition of persistence. If the redactions serve any larger purpose, it's this. They remind everyone that the search isn't over. The moment those black lines disappear, it means the investigation has ended either with an answer or with surrender. Until then, the ink itself is proof of motion, and so, in a strange way, the black lines have become part of the story's identity. They are the case's heartbeat, the visual language of unfinished truth. They mark not what the RCMP refuses to tell, but what they refuse to stop seeking. In that sense, the darkest parts of the page are also the brightest. They show where the work continues, where the silence still has something left to say. Every blackout in those pages isn't just censorship. It's a promise that someone, somewhere, is still looking. The redactions don't close this case, they keep it alive. And until every line turns white, Lilly and Jack Sullivan remain part of an unfinished sentence. If you believe those black lines still protect the truth, stay with us. This is True Child Cases. Subscribe, share, and keep the search alive, because sometimes the most important words are the ones we can't yet read.